excited to be your guinea pig. Or pioneer. Let's go with pioneer.
Let's go with pioneer. Okay. Right. I do think it's live. This is actually very exciting. It's just a constant learning journey, which I love because I love learning, but it's also a reminder of how hard it is to be new at something again. Every time I push myself to learn something new, like a new piece of technology, I'm humbled and my empathy is expanded as I remember how hard it is being a new teacher or being a new administrator or new coach.
Yeah, I've been trying to learn French. I'm Canadian, grew up in Canada. I'm a U.S. citizen now, but still very much Canadian. And I really feel it's almost a duty to learn French. But I have struggled, and I'm part of it is Kansas isn't really a hotbed of Franco language, but it gives me a lot of empathy for kids who can't read or who are struggling readers, because it must seem just awesome in a negative way to think of all I have to do. Because I feel like giving up with the French, because it's despite what I do, and I'm a pretty good learner. I have a hard time. So if I'm a kid who's got a lot of learned helplessness or a fixed mindset, it's going to be hard to do it. So I'm with you. I think learning pushes us, and it's a good thing too, though.
It is, yeah. I'm surprised when I've been trying to learn to play the piano this year, and I'm surprised how often I hear my internal self-talk saying things like, I'm so slow, I'm so stupid, I'm never going to learn this. And I'm just shocked. I hear myself, and I'm like, with everything I know about learning, and there it goes. Wow.
Right. And that's you.
Right. I know.
So I've been reading, I don't want to take us off, I don't know if there's a track we're on, but I've been reading this book, or listening to this book called Scarcity. I don't know if you're familiar with the book, but it's basically what the book hypothesizes is that scarcity leads to the same kind of phenomena all the time. And it kind of leads to tunnel vision. So, for example, I'm trying to get in shape and I'm trying to eat more healthy. And so I have a kind of a tunnel vision. So food is a lot more interesting to me than it might be to other people. And so it's the same thing with learning, I think. If we have scarcity in one way, so if we have kids showing up who are hungry or they're poor or whatever the issues might be, they're worried about psychological safety, and that's consuming a lot of their time. It's not surprising they have a hard time learning. So,
yeah.
At any rate.
Yeah. Well, let me officially and formally welcome you, Jim, and to any of our viewers who are able to be here live. Thank you for being here. This is an ever-evolving exploration into to learning and resilience and collaboration and sharing. Do you have dogs, Jim?
Yeah, somebody's at our door,
okay.
But they won't be talking the whole time.
Jim and I were talking just a few minutes ago. I'm not sure if you caught this, about just the challenge of being learners and trying new technology. And so this is the first time that I have had a guest on this live stream. And so I'm playing with the technology, and I'm trying to figure out how we can both be on the screen at the same time, but I'm not sure if I'm getting that. So I'll toggle back and forth between myself and Jim Knight, who is, I think of as just the guru, one of the most influential coaching experts, instructional coaching experts in the world, from whom I have learned a tremendous amount and been incredibly inspired. And he is joining me this morning to, I said, have what I hope will be an informal conversation, as if we were sitting across from each other having coffee. Jim, are you a coffee drinker or a tea drinker?
I am very much a coffee drinker. In fact, coffee would be one of my top 4 or 5 obsessions.
Okay. I am right there with you then.
I'm like very into the whole, sorry to interrupt, what are the right beans? Like, I have a scale. The water has to be 93 degrees Celsius. Like, I'm trying to make, one of my obsessions is the perfect cup of coffee.
Oh, I one of these days then we have got to get together and make coffee and drink coffee together. I am actually, my father is Costa Rican, and he lives right outside of San Jose, Costa Rica, up in the mountains. And we're in the process of, he has a tiny little house, 1 bedroom. We're in the process of building out a unit downstairs where I can stay with my family when we come. which could also be a writing retreat for me. And one of the things that I want to do is plant coffee bushes outside because they grow ideally there, and get an old-fashioned, the kind of grinder and roaster that my grandmother used to use, and make the perfect cup of coffee right there just after I've picked the beans, or the beans have to dry. But yes, I'm also obsessed with coffee. I love coffee. How many cups do you have a day?
I have about somewhere between 400 and 800 milliliters. So I'm not sure what that is. So that's probably like 16 and 16 and 32 ounces, around about that much. So 2 big cups like this would be what I would use.
I love that you know the exact amount there.
Well, the only reason I know that is not that I'm all scientific. It's that my coffee maker it's measured in milliliters. So everything in my scale is grams. So everything I do is metric because it's the technology that shapes me. Words shape us. So that's what's happening there.
They do. Well, as you're seeing, I am envisioning this conversation meandering around the topics of resilience in educators, how that intersects with the role of a coach, and then our personal journeys into resilience and what gives us joy in life, coffee, learning French, trying new things, and what are the challenges and how do we bounce back from them. So that's what I'm envisioning here in this conversation with Jim, and thanks for joining us.
I'm
Jim,
excited to be here.
Yeah? Do you have any hopes for this conversation where it might meander?
I like those things. I'm like you. We have to read a lot of books to know what's going on, to learn, to get better. Books help us improve. And so sometimes I'll read a book pretty quickly because I want to say, well, I want to get the essence of what they're all about. I don't have to get every word, but I have to sort of... And then sometimes I'll read a book where I have to say, this is just too much fun not to enjoy every word of this book. And your book, Onward, is one of those books. I started thinking, I need to get a really good read on it. And weirdly enough, I read the appendix first. I read all the back parts, all those things. And then I started into it and I thought, this is so beautifully written. I'm just going to take my time with it. So I'm grateful to have a chance to talk about the book. But just as a work of writing, it's impressive to me. It's a pleasure to read because of the way you wrote it. So thank you.
Thank you. My husband is reading it now, and it's been I want to ask him sort of, what page are you on? What are you reading? What do you think? What do you think? What do you think? And then he keeps saying it's so hard to read somebody's book in front of them. But I'm like, but what do you think? I felt like I wrote the book. I'd been thinking about the book and working on it in some ways for 2 or 3 years, but the actual sitting down and getting it out of me was, I would say, about 7 months. And that was a really intense, constant. I was up by 4:35 every morning, writing 6-7 hours a day, just a constant sort of expelling of words. And so it was a bit of a blur. So I'm like, but does it, is it clear? Does it make sense? Are the stories good? And he's saying, yes, now leave me alone. So it's been really fun the last month to hear people's responses, to see things on Twitter, to see people holding their books. But from what you have read and the work that you do with coaches...
I'll hold my book here. So.
Oh, thank you. The work you do with coaches, what are you reading that you feel like might be particularly relevant to or helpful to coaches?
Well, what am I reading right now?
In Onward, specifically, what you've read.
Well, I think the whole idea of emotional resiliency is really important. I think I hadn't thought about I know that I've done the Enneagram. I like Strength Finder. I like figuring out who I am as a person, and it's helpful to hold up a kind of a mirror. And I think I really like your term validation versus strength-based. I think a strength-based thing is important, but there's a sense in which you can validate and really look, and you don't suggest that we should shy away from the challenges. That in fact, when we have a strength-based approach, we have more energy to tackle the challenges. But I think that importance of validation, to me, there's judgment and there's validation. And judgment damages, and validation nourishes. And so I like that. I think I like the way I'll be curious to hear how you feel in a couple of years. But I like the idea of sort of making it have the rhythm of a year. You know, this is what I'm going to read in June. This is what I'm going to read in July. And I think the book has much broader applications in coaching, because I think every teacher has to deal with emotional resilience. It is an emotionally challenging. When people from the general public come tell us how to teach, and then they come in and they start teaching, they go, "Whoa! I had no idea how." I mean, just think of it. Raising one 5-year-old is pretty challenging. Yeah. Well, a room full of 5-year-olds, that's a whole different story. And you still have to give them the same kind of love and guidance as you would give one. So I think the book has many, many applications. I'm very interested right now in how we sabotage our own capacity to learn. And so we put blocks into the way. So I haven't read the section on learning, but I'm very excited to read that. I'm I believe strongly that we use the word principles. I don't know if they're interchangeable with values, but I really believe that a life that's, what Parker Palmer talks about, the undivided life, is really important. So as you can see, I got a lot of things going on in my brain, but I'm also curious. Well, I'll just say one last thing. And maybe there isn't one comes first, but your book has got me thinking about, do beliefs come before actions, or do actions come before beliefs? Tom Guskey, I believe, would say that we have to act ourselves into new beliefs, and there's a lot of people who would say that I came to believe kids can learn by watching them learn, Right. Mm-hmm. At the same time, I think you have to articulate your values, and it may just be that it's kind of like a learning style thing. Some people start with their beliefs, and that changes their habits. Mm-hmm. Some people start with their practices, and that changes their beliefs. But that's another big question in my mind too. Mm-hmm. So lots of stuff.
Yeah, that is a question that I've been grappling with also for years, particularly in the work and the coaching I do around building equitable schools and surfacing and interrupting beliefs that may not be helpful to every single child in every class every day. And so that question of what comes first, a change in practice or in belief, is one that I think is really essential for us to explore. And I think we've thought about that question in sort of too much of a dichotomy. We might have a tiny shift in a belief, which leads us to a tiny shift in practice, and then a tiny shift in practice to a tiny shift in a belief. And I think that those two are just much more interconnected and close. And that you're right, some people may have a stronger entry point through the belief chain or through the behavior practice chain. But I think that the way that we've thought about that is a little bit problematic.
Yeah, don't you think it's kind of a journey of both? It's like both of them. Right. Like one of my beliefs is I'd like to be universally controlled. I'd like to always control my emotions, and I'd like to always be a positive force in people's lives, especially the people I most love, my people in my family. Uh-huh. But am I always a positive force in their lives? Mm-hmm. No, I have a long way to go. I'm not as bad as I used to be, maybe, but it is a kind of like, I know my beliefs, mm-hmm. and I know my behavior, and I know where I want to. So the two, because I do think articulating your beliefs, they become kind of like a standard for trying to be the person you want to be.
Sure, right. And the more opportunities we have to name those and cultivate awareness of them, the more likely it is that we will actually move towards those. That's how I often think of a coach, is someone with whom you've shared your vision for who you want to be, your values, your principles, and a coach helps you move into that vision and uphold it and act congruously with that vision for yourself. And as a reminder, I often feel like as a coach, I'll go to a school to meet with someone, and I'm just walking down the hallway, and they see me, and they get this big smile, and they later tell me, like, just seeing you reminds me of who I want to be for my students or my teachers. It's just that reminder.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think it's in The Art of Coaching where you talk about the closer I come to peace, the closer I come to truth. Was that in The Art of Coaching?
You know what? This is awful. Do you forget what you've written in books?
Yeah. Well, let's just go with that then. You said that in your book. But I do think there's this sense in which, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong about that. Like, did you see the video of the fellow in France who climbed these 4 balconies to save this baby that was dangling?
I did see that. That was beautiful. Yeah.
And I look at that and I said, there is something universal going on there.
Yeah.
I think that's not a learned behavior.
Right.
I said, when we see another person, we have to learn not to do that.
Right.
I mean, I can see how fear would overwhelm our desire to do that. We could say, I'm not going to climb that wall because it's too risky.
Yeah.
But I think that there's the impulse to want to save that baby.
Yeah. Is
a universal thing. And so to me, as I was watching that, I thought, so these values and beliefs, I think they come out of something universal. That's it. And so what I'm trying to say is when you show up and the teacher says that, I think you're taking them closer to a universal truth. This is way beyond the scope of my knowledge, but I feel like when people see you and they say, you help me be the person I want to be, you're taking them closer to the truest version of themselves.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think so. And for me as a coach, that's really the highest compliment. It's so meaningful to be able to play that role in somebody's life.
Right.
Yeah. I'm seeing your bookshelves behind you. I love seeing people's bookshelves. When I go into somebody's house for the first time, I'm often gravitating immediately towards their bookshelves. I'm curious, in addition to Onward, what else are you reading these days, either professionally or personally?
Really, professionally and personally, they're very different for me. I just finished Doug Fisher and Nancy Fry and Russ Qualia's book on engagement, which I think is a really good book because it broadens our understanding of engagement. And Russ Qualia's work on student voice really enriches our understanding of engagement. As I read it, I thought it was a great book. I just went through, I'm writing right now, so I'm kind of in a heavy reading phase, but I went back through Stone and Heen's book, Thanks for the Feedback. And that got me thinking about how do we position ourselves as learners. The coaching involves 2 people, the coach and the collaborating teacher. And if the collaborating teacher is not into it, and there's, so they would say, Stone and Heen, that we spend way too much time focused on the feedback giver and not near enough time on the feedback receiver in terms of setting up a good coaching relationship.
Right.
And then, like I said, Scarcity is the other book. That's my drive around listening to book, Scarcity. So.
Okay. Good audiobook recommendation then.
Yeah. Well, so yeah.
Yeah. And so what are you working on in terms of writing right now?
I've got 2 projects. One of them is on data. And it doesn't sound, I just don't think like that a ripple of pleasure went through you when I said the word data there. But what I think is often the way data is shared in schools, whether it's teacher evaluation or coaching conversations, however, is actually pretty, it's destructive. It's not just not effective. It actually makes things worse. It's demoralizing. I had a person I work with in Texas, and he had first year as an assistant principal, and he said, well, the way I look at it is, if the person I talk to doesn't cry or doesn't get angry, it's been a good conversation. Well, that's a pretty low bar for something that stands at the heart of, and I'm sure you hear the same thing, but I talk to a lot of people, and they say that the whole evaluation process isn't very effective. Right. And so data, I think, is important because it gives us a vocabulary for describing things you wouldn't ordinarily see. But the way we have conversations about it isn't very effective. So I'm trying to say, well, how can we talk about data? What data should we gather? How do we get reliable and valid data? And then how do we embed that in a conversation that's a mutually humanizing conversation, not a dehumanizing conversation? Yeah, so that's what that book's about. And I've actually been working on the engagement part right now, because to me, engagement is, people trivialize engagement. Engagement is an equity issue. If kids aren't coming to school feeling excited about it, it's great if they hit the test scores and all that goes up, but we're going to lose some kids who won't be there because they're not. And if we have kids who leave school way less excited about learning than when they show up, right, I don't think we've done our job. So to me, engagement is about much more than just, is the kid looking at the teacher when the teacher talks. Right. It's about their connectedness with the school, their psychological safety, the meaning they take out of the learning experiences they're having. And so to me, engagement is kind of the first one, and that's what I'm obsessing about now. How about you? What are you working on?
Well, that sounds great. I just want to say that actually, I'm not sure if I'm not sure what my response was to you mentioning data, but I actually really do love talking about data and looking at data and finding ways to look at data in humane ways, and including expanding our notion of what is data also. Have you read Got Data, Now What?
No.
I'm blanking on the authors, but it's a fantastic, I love that book on data. And the authors also wrote a lengthier book about data, and I'm also blanking on the name of that one, but look up Got Data, Now What? And then the other book that's by those authors is also fantastic. I would love to figure out how to have more conversations about data that are really meaningful. And similarly about engagement, it's absolutely, I think engagement is so fascinating because it's one of those things that is combining engagement with data. How do we measure engagement? How do we assess it and evaluate it? And what looks like engagement is different for different people. So I think that raises a whole host of interesting conversations and reflections. But absolutely, kids being engaged, it's got to be the starting point. And then the connection there with engagement and relationships with teachers, and can you be engaged in learning if you don't have that psychological safety and you don't feel like your teacher cares about you, and you're not, that relationship piece is also just critical.
That's why Russ Qualia's work is so helpful, because what he shows us is the large percentage of kids who feel like the teacher doesn't care about them, doesn't want to hear what they have to say, doesn't know their name, right, doesn't care if they succeed, isn't enthusiastic about the learning. I mean, his data, over 55, if I'm not mistaken, over 55,000 students still in the student voice survey. It says that this is an area that's really important. But engagement is only one part. We still have to measure, have the kids learn the content, and I think you have to look at, we basically say the goals are around either engagement or achievement or behavior. And behavior is about creating that psychologically safe environment, a learner-friendly culture.
Right. Yeah. Well,
go ahead.
Oh, I am wondering if you could describe, if you walked into, let's say, a middle school classroom, and it was the classroom that you had always dreamed, that you've always imagined for kids to have, what would you see and hear in that classroom?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is I think you would call it the way of being of the teacher. Uh-huh. The teacher's intentional, and the teacher is a designer in the sense of prototyping things and continuously improving what they do. Mm-hmm. And the teacher sees the children as little human beings. Mm. They're kids, but they're not objects. In the sense that Paulo Freire talks about subjects and objects and how we do banking education versus dialogue, the teacher interacts with the kids in a way that sees I guess it's an act of love. They have an attitude of benevolence towards every child. As hard as that is, and recognizing how challenging it is, they don't slip into turning the kids into objects and saying, oh, those kids with that label or this group of students. They see every kid as a child worth love. And then I think this is more theoretical than practical, but I think every child would have the opportunity to realize their potential in that environment of safety and love, and kids want to learn. Yeah. And so there's a sense in which that they're succeeding and they're able to pursue their interests in a way that's successful. And whether it's something relatively mundane like writing a sentence, or it's exploring some research project that's really fascinating to you now, like maybe something to do with wildlife or some big project, but there's a real sense in which the kids are, you think of Vygotsky zones of proximal development, they're just at the top edge, right, and they're excited by it. Yeah. They're right in the right spot, the sweet spot for learning. Mm-hmm. That's now in practical reality. I don't know if I can pin it all down, except to say that the teacher's continually trying to get there. They're experimenting. Well, this direct instruction process helped them here, but it didn't accomplish this, and this project worked, but it took way too long, and now we don't have enough time to cover important things. And this thing was perfect, and I'm going to do it exactly like this next year. This sort of process of continuous, that idea like a designer prototyping something and gathering data and continue. And to me, that's a rewarding thing that's the way we research coaching. So I think that would be a rewarding way for teachers. What's your answer to that question?
Well, I definitely think we have a lot in common in terms of that vision. And one thing I really hear you saying, which I share, is that everybody in the room is a learner. The children are learners and, right in their ZPD, and that the teacher is also. I think that your first comments about seeing every child and their full humanity and their potential and the love that's when I think about for my own child, what I want most for him in school is just, it almost makes me, I feel like I'll almost cry saying it, because all I want is for his teachers to see him for who he is and to love him. And I know that he's 14. I know he can be annoying, and I know that it's hard teaching middle school, and I just so badly want for him to be seen for his full humanity and for his potential, and to be offered the resources to explore those interests and what he's curious about. And I also want his teachers to be feeling like they can be learning and growing and fulfilling their full potential. And that's where I recognize that what you're describing, what I envision, is also sometimes it's like we want teachers to be saints. That's right. A saint. A saint loves every single 14-year-old, and maybe has 120 of them in a day, and is engaged in her own learning and growth, and doesn't lose her temper. And that's really hard. And that's why when I'm a big believer in starting at the end, in backwards planning, in visualization, and then I recognize how much structural change needs to happen so that teachers have the opportunities to live into that vision, because it's a really challenging one. And that's where the work that I did, both around coaching and resilience, to me comes in, because the resilience around being able to manage those challenges and not be triggered by a 14-year-old rolling his eyes, and it's challenging work. And I think we have to set up our schools in a way that allows people to live into that vision.
Yeah, we said the ideal, and so I guess the ideal is I want my son taught by a saint.
Yeah, right.
And I'd like the coach to be a saint too.
Yes.
So then we have reality, and reality is just like you said. We want people who are learners, who are doing their best. One of the things in that book, Scarcity, which is kind of on my mind right now, is they talk about how air traffic controllers who come home at the end of the day, who've had a really, really hectic day, they're not the best parents they ordinarily are. They're kind of worn out by all those planes in the air.
Right.
And teachers every day have a lot of planes in the air. And so it is a tough job, because your what they call in the book bandwidth is contracted by all those little things that kind of wear you down. You know, you can come in on Monday morning and be worn out by 10 o'clock just because of all the challenges you face. It's not an easy job.
Yes, yeah, and that's a really interesting analogy, even just to also think about what teachers go through when they get home and they've been with little kids all day, or medium or big sized kids. And so many teachers have their own children and their own lives and want to have their own lives. And yet what's left for those little people when they get home? It's really, it's funny because we just finished the 3-day weekend, right? Yesterday was Memorial Day. And yesterday my son was saying, every weekend should be a 3-day weekend. I feel so much better about going to school tomorrow. And I said, every teacher would love to have a 3-day weekend too. I think we'd all be better. And I said, I think you should, he's about to go to high school next year. I said, I think you should see what you can do, organize to propose that, even just a few more 3-day weekends. I said, your school might go for it. And he said, well, the only problem is that for parents who work, they can't have their kids just at home on a Monday by themselves. And I thought, first of all, I was like, wow, his mind went to that. That's, he's got a great expansive perspective. But it really was more, I thought about how much more sort of balanced and rested he felt, I felt going into this week. Just, it's, I think we have to toggle back and forth between how do we cultivate individual resilience and the ability to manage the challenges with what can we do on a structural level in terms of institutional change to create the conditions in which we can thrive.
Yeah, I think when you get worn down by what you're doing, in whatever way you want to put it, it's hard to do it gets harder and harder to do the very thing you need to do so you won't be worn down. In terms of your section on self-care, mm-hmm. I've really been focused myself on, if I'm going to do what I want to do, I have to be healthy and I have to eat healthy, I have to exercise. But like when I'm worn out, that's the last time I want to go exercising because I'm tired, Right. Give me the pizza. Yeah. So it is it's a challenge. It's a challenge to not get into this vicious cycle of not taking care of yourself, not developing the resiliency. And then, when you, let's just say you lose your cool at a meeting, and then you're embarrassed by it, and then you have less energy and less resilience the next day. That's why your book is so important, because I don't know of another one that really helps us think through these things, sort of systematically say, what can I do to take care of myself and to know who I am, to become more emotionally intelligent so that I can, ultimately, it's good for me, but it's also, it helps me be a much more benevolent human being, Yeah. I just saw somebody walking up, and so we could have more dogs here in a minute, just to warn you ahead of time.
I just wanted to make sure when I heard that before that it wasn't something on my technology and it wasn't working right. I couldn't tell. No. What kind of dogs do you have?
We have a white lab named Dodger, and we have a Bernese mountain dog puppy. Oh. And the puppy and I aren't as close as the dog, because the puppy is always chewing all over the white lab. But,
wow.
But Dodger has cancer, so we have a puppy so that the transition won't be quite so difficult. So that's the deal. But Dodger's been doing great. We thought we might have lost him a long time ago, but he's like eating all kinds of raw food and taking hemp concentrate, HBD or whatever it is, and he's flourishing. So maybe we'll have both noisy dogs for a long time.
Oh, I hope so. Well,
the mountain dog is Coco, after Coco Chanel. So.
Oh wow! Oh, great. Those are beautiful dogs. Those are amazing.
Yeah. Well, my wife's a photographer, so she wants photogenic dogs. That's a really high criteria for her.
I see. Those are absolutely gorgeous dogs. So that was a good choice there.
Right.
Well, I really appreciate you joining me this morning for this conversation, and it's making me even more excited to be together in person in October in Las Vegas. And I'm wondering if you just want to say a little bit about that conference for folks who might be interested in attending.
I would like to, and I also say that I'm grateful for you coming. I think you add an enormous amount to the conference. We really want the conference to be a place for people to meet and share ideas, to develop a community of coaches, particularly coaches who have a focus on instructional coaching, which I think your work informs, and even the process you promote in the art of coaching could be used for instructional coaching, but your application is broader, I think, and it gets at more issues around transformation and our beliefs. We sort of focus on, focuses on instruction. At any rate, a lot of the people who come to the conference are instructional coaches. We try to bring in the people who have influenced us every year, and this year there's just a whole host of people. Peter DeWitt's going to be there. I've just been chatting with him this morning. You're going to be there. Joellen Killian's one of our keynote presenters. Pedro Noguero is going to be a presenter. Chip Heath from Heath and Heath, who wrote the book Switch, and a number of books that have really influenced our thinking, and just a whole host of sort of coaches. We call it it's like Woodstock for coaches, and it's in Lake Las Vegas, so it's actually a very quiet, peaceful place, but it's for those who want to go to see Blue Man Crew or whatever. It's just a Uber ride downtown, but it's kind of out. We did a little institute there a while back, and it was a beautiful place. So we also have pre-conferences that sort of get at our stuff. But it's meant to be a chance for coaches to get together with the people who are really shaping the world of instructional coaching. And it's a good for other leaders, too. And if they people just go to instructionalcoaching.com, or if they email hello@instructionalcoaching.com, they can get information.
Great, and I'll be sure to share those links also attached to this video and on my site. You have pulled together a really amazing group of people, and I can't wait to learn from them and to meet other coaches and have more conversations about. I could talk about coaching all day, every day for hours. It's kind of that's actually something I would say I'm a little embarrassed about, is how much I could continue to talk about coaching and schools and transformation all the time. But I am working on. I also love reading fiction, and so I am incorporating more fiction in my life. I just have to. It's on my 2018 goals. It's on my wall, and I'm committed to not only reading about education and transformation and related subjects.
So I know we're closing here, but who are a couple of your fiction authors you really, really love?
Oh my goodness. I just read a young adult novel called Children of Blood and Bone by Tomi Adeyemi, who is a Nigerian-American author, a young woman, and it is an absolutely gorgeous, stunning, gripping novel that takes place sort of in a West African, it's sort of like maybe a Harry Potter with more of a political message with all African brown-skinned characters, and it's just beautiful and moving, and it's the first in a trilogy, and I just can't wait. It's so unfair that we have to wait. But I have also been binging on audiobooks by Sophie Kinsella, who is she's in the Chicklet author, and really enjoying sort of the break from serious things. But I kind of alternate. I go back and forth between serious, heavy fiction and then nonfiction. I'm about to go to Southern Africa for 7 weeks this summer, and so I've been starting to read a lot of literature by South Africans. I just listened to Trevor Noah's memoir, Born a Crime, which is fantastic. So that's what I'm reading in addition to all the workbooks these days.
Very cool.
Yeah.
I used to do a course in Toronto And we would read the authors who were coming to the Toronto Literary Series every week, so it kept me, and this is pre-internet days, so I'd have to go to the library to try to figure out who this person was, but at that point, for a few years, I was right on top of contemporary fiction. So it would be, Margaret Atwood one week, and Margaret Lawrence was there, but then also a lot of American writers. Chinua Achebe, I got to meet. He signed my copy of this book, and we would go, and then we read the books, and we hear the person read, and then we talk to them afterwards about the book. It was really, really a lot of fun. But since I've done this work, I don't read very much. Jhumpa Lahiri is one that I like a lot.
She's great.
I mean, I've always been a huge Alice Munro fan, but
you have to as a Canadian, right?
That's well, yeah, but she's Nobel Prize, that's pretty high criteria. But I should read. Let's see, we're both doing this. I should be doing this, but it would probably help me be a better writer if I was reading those great writers.
Well, we follow our passions, and there'll be space, there'll be time. So,
right.
Well, thank you so much, Jim, for joining me this morning. And this video will be up on our site so people can watch it at any time and share it. And I'll be sharing some resources about your conference and some of the other things that we've spoken about. So, again, just thank you so much for joining me this morning.
I'm grateful. I'm honored. And I'm also grateful and honored grateful for your works. Your Art of Coaching is a really, if you're a coach, you should read the book. It's really not just a book about coaching, but it's a book about a way of life, and it's very comprehensive and without not being practical. It's a great book. But the new one is beautiful. I'm impressed. Parker Palmer's wife, he quotes this in one of his introductions, says that your writing should be beautiful, it should be clear, and it should be meaningful. And I think you hit those criteria right on with this book. I think it's wonderful.
Oh, thank you. Gosh, that means so much. Thank you. All right, Jim.
Take care.
Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.